Okay. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do in the site survey, in the details of this, is really probably the hardest thing, which is defining the site. Now, what I have here is kind of the drawing of like a house with a backyard and a front yard situation. That's the easiest to explain it. In general, we mean when we say site, we mean kind of like property. If it's your home, it's like probably your yard, your balcony, your patio. If you're not monitoring at your home, it can be a little bit more confusing. But generally, the property, your place of worship, even if there's multiple plantings, that's the site. Like basically something you could give an address to. If it's a park, again, it's that park property. This protocol is designed for a situation in which you can count all of the plants. If you wanted to monitor like a forest preserve or a huge park district natural area with 500 milkweed plants, I would encourage you to do the Monarch larval monitoring protocol and not ours. Their full protocol has a setup for if you need to do just a subset of the plants. We've designed this to be something for small patches where you can count everything. Now, at your site, you might have or want to have more than one patch of milkweed. For example, in this drawing, you could have a backyard patch and combine these two into a front yard patch. And then you could choose to monitor both of them or one of them. And you might want to do that, for example, if you're collecting caterpillars to head start or hand rear, which I'll talk about in the next slide. Or you might want to do that because this is more plants than you want to count every week. It is a thing to do this every week if you have a lot of plants. As somebody who's done this, we did a patch with hundreds of plants at the museum because we had help and we could, but it was like a thing we had to allocate time for every week. So my first piece of advice is like choose the amount that works for you. I'd hate for you to like take on more and then get halfway through the season and quit entirely. I'd rather like folks do the right amount that works for them or like halfway through the season drop a patch. The other thing that could happen here, and this is a little bit different than last year, is you could have your backyard patch and then you could have front yard north and front yard south because this is divided by non-natural habitat. Last year we had a rule with like distances, and ultimately folks found that confusing, and wasn't really a lot of science to back it up. So if you have clumps of milkweed divided by non-natural habitat, turf, grass, sidewalks, things like that, you can make those separate patches or you can not. That's up to you. That's up to how managing this works for you. It could be really helpful if these are different species. It's just easier to record the data that way. Ultimately, you don't need to monitor all of the patches at your site. If you have a clump of milkweed and you choose to monitor, you need to monitor all the milkweed in that clump. So it's kind of about managing the amount of work that you want to do because you're volunteers. So I alluded to head starting, and we've talked a little bit about that for folks that joined at the beginning. Head starting, hand rearing, it goes by different names, is the idea of taking eggs or caterpillars and raising them indoors or in these kind of pop-up mesh containers. In the world of things that Monarch people argue about, head starting has been somewhat contentious. We follow the guidelines by the Monarch joint venture, which say rearing some monarch butterflies at home because it's cool and you want to see it and you want to help monarchs out, that's great. The large commercial operations that rear 10,000 monarchs and like sell them to be released at weddings and events, that's probably not good because there is disease that can spread because that scale, it could have a negative genetic impact on the population. The Monarch joint venture site also has some really good advice and guidelines about cleaning between generations of caterpillars. There are some diseases that monarchs can spread amongst themselves. One of them goes by the name OE. And so cleaning is really good because that is a thing that is probably also helping or causing some of the decline in the population. For our project, if you're gonna collect caterpillars and rear them from a patch that you're monitoring, you could only collect fourth and fifth instars, which is the later stages. Instar is like stage. Um, or if you want to divide up like we had on that uh, drawing and just collect data from your backyard patch and collect eggs and caterpillars and food for the eggs and caterpillars from your front yard patch, that's great. That's part of what we designed this for. If you know, if you want to just have a few caterpillars to see it, that's awesome. We just can't have data from that patch because obviously we have eggs and caterpillars disappearing from the data, and we would think that they were like eaten by ants, but really they're being reared.